The room was packed, not just with cameras, not just with lights, but with ego. And tonight, that ego had a name. Graham Sloane, former Deputy National Security Advisor under the last administration. Tailored suit, smirk intact, voice already thundering across the studio, before his opponent even stepped on stage. She's just another progressive with no grasp of national defense, he declared. His tone wasn't skeptical. It was surgical. Meant to draw blood. Meant to get laughs. Some did laugh. Others shifted in their seats. A few even clapped. Sloane had been here before. On air. On stage. On attack. His power was built not on truth, but on control of the narrative. And tonight, he came thinking it would be the same old show. The setup was familiar. A live CNN town hall, moderated by veteran journalist Chris Hale. The format confrontational. The audience split. The stakes national credibility. Graham stood beneath the lights like a man expecting victory, because he was told the woman behind the curtain was new, inexperienced, and easy to provoke. He even laughed when he saw her name on the lineup. Diana Rowe, freshman Congresswoman from Texas, 42 years old, civil rights attorney turned lawmaker. No classified briefings under her belt. No Pentagon clearance. Just a sharp voice and a folder. That's all he saw. But what he didn't see was that the folder she carried held not speeches, not rebuttals, but records, receipts. And that would make all the difference. Graham paced slowly, his voice slicing through applause like a scalpel. She criticizes the intelligence community, but has never even handled a classified document. She's all performance, no substance. They clapped again, this time louder, as if volume could hide the weakness of the argument. From behind the curtain, Diana heard every word, and didn't blink. She didn't need to. She had read every briefing she was allowed. She knew the oversight process, because she didn't just talk about transparency. She served on the committee that enforced it. And tonight, she wasn't stepping out there to be polite. She was stepping out to draw the line. Chris Hale's voice cut in. Let's bring out Congresswoman Diana Rowe. And with that, the game changed. She stepped out, in navy blue, not to match the curtains, but to contrast the arrogance across from her. Her stride was deliberate, her expression calm, but the glint in her eyes, that was steel. The audience didn't know what to expect. But Graham Sloane, he already thought he'd won. He didn't even rise, just leaned back, grinning, arms crossed. Chris Hale gave her the usual intro. Freshman representative, civil rights attorney, member of the House Oversight Committee. But none of it mattered to Graham, because in his world, who she was couldn't possibly threaten what he had. And that was his first mistake. Thank you for having me, Diana said, placing her folder on the table. I've been listening closely to Mr. Sloane's comments, and I'm glad to be here to clarify a few things. From backstage, a staffer handed a cue card to the producer. It read, "Be ready for Exhibit A." And just like that, the energy in the room shifted, because the audience didn't know it yet. But a showdown wasn't coming. It had already begun. Congresswoman, Mr. Sloane has questioned your qualifications to speak on matters of national security. How do you respond? She didn't look at Sloane. She adjusted the microphone, smoothed the folder beside her, and smiled. Thank you, Chris. And thank you, Mr. Sloane, for your concerns. It's always enlightening to hear from someone so uniquely tied to the previous administration. The pause after uniquely stung. The audience caught it. The undertone. The irony. Even Graham twitched, but she moved on. I find it curious that someone who constantly accuses others of grandstanding has spent the last 5 minutes performing a monologue about classified access. She folded her hands. For the record, I sit on the committee responsible for oversight of national security operations. So yes, classified material, legal briefings, and intelligence procedures are part of my job, whether Mr. Sloane likes it or not. Graham leaned forward, finally breaking in. Oversight committees aren't the same as classified decision-making. I've handled live intelligence. I've made decisions under pressure. You've read summaries. There's a difference. The audience applauded, mostly his supporters, and Graham saw it as a win. A jab landed, but Diana didn't blink. She looked at Hale, then back at the audience. Thank you, she said again, calmly, because what Mr. Sloane has just demonstrated is exactly what's broken in how we talk about national security. Gatekeeping, arrogance, the idea that only those who are in the room deserve to be heard. But the Constitution doesn't say that. Oversight isn't optional. It's required. Sloane scoffed and shook his head. Dismissive, condescending. The cameras caught it all. She continued, I was elected, not to flatter those who used to hold power, but to hold them accountable. Security and democracy aren't enemies. They must work together. Otherwise, we don't have either. Nice words. Sloane interrupted, cutting her off again. But where's the substance? Where's the experience? This is CNN, not a campaign trail. He turned to the audience. They deserve answers, not slogans. Scattered claps again, but lighter this time. Chris Hale raised a hand. Let's allow the Congresswoman to finish. Diana nodded, not flustered, not even fazed. She tilted her head. Then maybe we should discuss substance, she said. Since Mr. Sloane wants to talk credentials, let's talk about conduct. Let's talk about what it means to actually handle classified material responsibly. Graham's brow furrowed. She reached for the folder, and in that moment, the shift was visible. On his face, in the air, in the camera angle, because she wasn't just here to respond. She came to reveal, slow, precise, as if pulling back the curtain on a play the audience didn't know they were watching. Mr. Sloane, she said, are you familiar with the internal report from the Office of Inspector General, dated June 2022? He blinked, just once. Briefly, I'm familiar with many reports. You'll have to be more specific. Diana nodded to the production crew, and behind her, the screen changed. A government-sealed document appeared. Highlighted text. Footers intact. Page 47. Paragraph 3. She said, clear voice, unshaken. It names you directly, Mr. Sloane, citing what the report called troubling breaches of protocol regarding classified briefings during the transition period. Gasps rippled through the studio. Graham's posture shifted. Not slouched. Not defiant. Just slightly. Frozen. That report is out of context. He managed. Portions of it have been disputed. Diana nodded. I thought you might say that. That's why I brought this. She reached again. A second report, dated September 2023. The follow-up. She lifted it, calm as a surgeon. This reaffirmed the original findings and clarified that the disputed parts did not include the portions tied to your actions. The camera zoomed in on his face. Gone was the smirk. Now came the clench of the jaw, the narrowing eyes, and the visible calculation. This is a political hit job. He blurted, desperate now. This is what the left does. They find something half-baked, throw it on television, and hope nobody checks the facts. Diana turned to him. These are official records, Mr. Sloane. Documents acquired through FOIA. Your name is printed on every page. And unless you're saying the Inspector General, appointed by your own administration, was conspiring against you, I suggest we stop pretending this is theater. Mr. Sloane. But Diana raised a finger gently. Not now, she said, and even the moderator stepped back. She pulled out document number 3. A sworn affidavit from James Calder, former Deputy Director of Intelligence Operations. It says, she read, that after the first violation was reported internally, you attempted to have the reporting analyst reassigned. And I quote, we need people who understand how we do things now. That conversation, according to this affidavit, took place 3 days after the breach report. Another gasp. Louder now. Audience members leaned forward. Some had their phones up, filming every second. This is character assassination. Graham burst out. This is edited, cherry-picked, spun out of context. That's not what happened. But Diana was already pulling out the next file. A transcript. December 13th, 2021. House Oversight Committee. You stated, under oath, I never shared any classified materials. Outside approved channels. She looked up, then back down. Yet, this report documents 3 separate occasions in which you did exactly that. You violated internal protocols, shared sensitive materials in unsecured environments, and failed to report the incidents. How do you explain that discrepancy? Graham's voice cracked slightly. These documents don't tell the full story. There were mitigating factors, context, gray areas. Diana leaned forward. Then maybe you can tell us how 3 independent reviewers, including 2 from your own agency, all reached the same conclusion. You see, Mr. Sloane, this isn't a matter of left or right. This is a matter of record. You want to talk experience? Let's talk responsibility. Because holding a clearance means knowing how to carry the burden, not just flaunting it. Because you sat in the room. The studio had gone completely silent. Even Chris Hale couldn't find words. She didn't flinch. She didn't gloat. She just flipped the next page, like turning over a weapon that had been waiting for daylight. This, she said, is an internal communication between your chief of staff and the personnel office, dated exactly 48 hours after the first security protocol was flagged. It reads, he needs them out of his section before Friday. They're causing problems. The screen behind her lit up. A redacted email chain. Still legible. Still damning. Mr. Sloane, she said, are you telling this audience that moving whistleblowers into non-operational roles was purely coincidental? He froze. The flush in his face was back. Red. Not from anger, but from exposure. These were personnel decisions. He muttered. They had nothing to do with reports. They were made for workflow balance. Interesting, Diana said, because the same personnel officer later testified, under oath, that the timing was, quote, highly suspicious and lacked standard review. And that's not from me. That's from the record. Mr. Sloane blinked. Rapidly now. The camera zoomed in, capturing the slight tremble in his fingertips. He came to dominate, to mock, to win. No. He was trying to breathe. Diana said, standing now. The desk no longer necessary. The studio lights didn't overpower her. They bent to her. Let's remember how this started. She pointed towards Sloane. He opened tonight by questioning whether I, a freshman congresswoman, was qualified to speak about national security. He told this audience I'd never handled responsibility. He mocked me credentials. But what have we actually learned? That the man who claimed to defend the system bent the rules when they didn't suit him. That the person who preached about clearance ignored the chain of custody. That the defender of the Republic retaliated against his own staff when they raised red flags. And yet, he still claims the moral high ground. The silence in the studio was seismic. No coughs. No shuffles. Not even a whisper. Chris Hale turned toward Sloane. "Mr. Sloane, would you like to respond?" Graham straightened his jacket, visibly grasping for air. "What we've seen here is political theater," he said. "Classic DC ambush tactics, twisting details for applause lines. But the American people know the real work happens off camera. And my record of service," Diana interrupted, calmly, with one final blow. "Then maybe, Mr. Sloane, you should have stayed off camera. Because if this is what the public sees in 10 minutes, what's been hiding behind closed doors for 10 years? The audience erupted, not just with claps, but with standing ovation. Some from her supporters, some from undecideds, even a few from the other side, because what they had just seen wasn't performance. It was precision. Phones lit up like a battlefield. Audience members posted clips. Reporters dashed out pre-written headlines. And producers, once skeptical of her inclusion, scrambled to reorient the next segment. Within minutes, Number Row receipts was trending on Twitter. Within 30, TikTok had slowed under the weight of replays. Instagram flooded with clips of her final blow. Cut, captioned, shared millions of times. How it started versus how it ended. Read one viral meme, featuring a side-by-side Graham Sloane grinning in the intro shot, and pale, stiff, in the final frame. CNN's official account shared the exchange. Twice. Backstage, Sloane's team was on the phone. "Get ahead of this. Call Fox. Spin the retaliation angle." Meanwhile, Diana sat quietly, still on her chair, still sipping water, still unmoved. Chris Hale leaned over. "Congresswoman," he said, softly, "that was unexpected." "Sometimes," she replied. The truth is, that was all she said. Even political opponents had to admit something had shifted. Major news outlets ran specials. CNN called it Receipts and Reckoning. Washington Post ran the headline, "The folder that flipped the studio." Politico wrote, "From oversight rookie to national firestorm, who is Diana Rowe?" Even Fox News, unable to ignore the wave, ran their own spin. Graham Sloane, ambushed on live, television political theater or setup. But behind the coverage came the calculus. Democratic strategists began to reassign her name, not just as a background committee voice, but as a future speaker. Fundraiser invites were sent before midnight. Republican consultants scrambled. Who greenlit that town hall? Why didn't he prep harder? What else is in that folder? Meanwhile, young staffers in DC, legal interns, and first-year congressional aides began printing her quotes, plastering them on Slack walls, pinning them to corkboards. "Bring your folder, know your facts, don't flinch." Because Diana Rowe hadn't just ended a man's talking points. She'd rewritten the playbook on how facts can still destroy bluster. Even in an age where most think the loudest voice wins. She didn't yell. She didn't interrupt. She just stood there, with receipts, and reminded the country what truth sounded like. Congresswoman Diana Rowe stood at a podium in Washington, Not in a town hall, not in a television studio, but in front of 36 reporters, and behind her, a printout of the same Inspector General report that had made Graham Sloane flinch, now served as Exhibit 1. In a larger legislative push, the CLEAR Act, Congressional Law for Ethical Access and Reporting. She was no longer reacting to a smear. She was building structure for what accountability should look like. Her proposal: mandatory documentation trails for all classified clearance decisions, whistleblower protection, reinforcements, and the creation of a bipartisan review board to audit abuse of access after each administration ends. Not one news outlet ignored the rollout, because they couldn't. She had the eyes of the nation, and this time, she wasn't pointing fingers. She was pointing forward. What happened on CNN, she said, wasn't a one-off. It was a symptom. We keep elevating people, not for how they serve, but for how they spin. That needs to stop, and we need to stop it now. The chamber stood quiet, because the sound of someone, not campaigning but governing, is rarer than it should be. The phrase, "bring receipts," was no longer just a meme. It was doctrine, printed on mugs, written into speeches, used in school debates, work presentations, and yes, political town halls across the country. And yet, Diana Rowe never tried to capitalize on it. She declined late-night interviews, refused book deals, and when a PAC offered to fund a nationwide tour, she sent them a 5-word email: "I'm still doing my job." Back in her district, constituents showed up in record numbers, but not for selfies. They came with notebooks, folders, questions, because she had set a tone, one that dared people to do more than perform, to actually prepare. And as for Graham Sloane, he faded. No public apology, no full admission, just fewer calls answered, less camera time booked, and a growing awareness that maybe his time had ended, not with scandal, but with truth. A freshman congresswoman didn't just debate him. She dismantled him, professionally, legally, publicly, because in an era of noise, someone, finally, came with silence and facts. And in doing so, Diana Rowe gave the country something it didn't know it had lost: respect for the weight of truth. So the next time someone asks, "What does accountability look like?" show them the clip. Show them the folder. Show them Diana Rowe.